Good morning and welcome to the Hawaii State Ethics Commission. I'm Chair Fong, and today is February 15th, 2023, and the time is 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to ask Rob to do a roll call vote to make sure we have a quorum. And also, can you specify whether or not you're alone? And after the commissioners introduce themselves, then I would like to have the staff do the same for him.
Thank you. Commissioner Gralty,
Present and all alone.
Commissioner Hom,
Present and alone.
Commissioner Tobias,
Present and alone.
recognizing the chair and myself, Robert Harris, are present at the hearing room. Moving to staff, Key,
Present and alone.
I think simply just acknowledging if you are alone or not is sufficient. Susan,
Yes, I'm alone.
Nancy,
I'm alone.
Benita,
I'm alone here.
Patrick,
Yeah, I'm alone.
Chair.
I'm here. I'm with Executive Director Robert Harris. All right, let's begin. Just one announcement, since we do have the public. For any members of the public who may be joining us remotely, if the commission's video conference connection is lost during the meeting, we will recess the meeting and reconvene after our connection is restored. Please check the commission's website, www.ethics.hawaii.gov, for information about reconnecting to the meeting. If the meeting is continued to a later date or terminated, information about this will be posted on our website. Any questions from the members of the public? Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to the consideration approval of minutes of January 19, 2023. Are there any corrections? If not, I entertain a motion. We approve the minutes of January 19th, 2023.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Tobias,
Second.
second by Commissioner Hall. Any discussion? All those in favor? Do we have to have a roll call vote?
Yes, we do.
Roll call vote?
Commissioner Hom,
Aye.
Commissioner Gralty.
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Chair.
Aye. No objections. Motion's carried.
Chair.
We also, yeah, go ahead.
That's good. I was just going to recommend maybe we could skip number 2 without going into executive session, since you're going to have to defer on the evaluation anyways. You could always put that on till next meeting.
Then we have minutes for in the last.
We do, but I don't know if you necessarily want to go into executive session just to approve minutes.
Okay,
We can certainly do it next
Okay.
meeting.
we're gonna skip item number 2 because it's not an issue that has to be brought up at this time. Okay, we'll move on to the executive director's report, and before he gives his report, I wanted to congratulate our I guess Assistant Executive Director Susan, and Key, Pat, and Lynn in regards to the training for our, I use the word, sensitive positions in the state. I already took this training as a professor at the university, but I had to take it again because we're in a very sensitive positions. I guess those are the words. And I thought that the training that we had, I think, how many people do we have? About
I think a little over 70.
we had about 70 key positions, I guess. And I thought it was very informative. And I think it was easy to understand. That's probably the most important, easy to understand. So I want to thank them for a job well done. And by the way, I did get 100% on all the quizzes, so I'd have been embarrassed if I flunked. But again, thank you very much. Keep up the good work, Robert.
Thank you. I agree heartily. The staff are doing an amazing job with regards to training. We also do get the evaluation reports afterwards, and I do have to say consistently, very strong praise generally from all the participants. Last year, we roughly doubled the amount of people who participated in our training sessions comparative to, as far as I'm aware, any other time in the commission's history, with nearly 9,000 state employees, board commission members going through the training. So, that is a high water mark, and hopefully it's one that's going to be exceeded again this year, thanks to the wonderful staff.
I remember that actually Commissioner Hong was in the same class. And I don't know about Commissioner Tobias and Commissioner Gralty. Commissioner Hong, do you have anything to say about the training that you got? I want to ask you how you did on the quizzes.
No, I thought it was excellent. And, I think Susan and Key did a great job.
How about,
So the others have already taken the training.
oh, they have, okay. Well, thank you very much. Okay, sorry, Rob.
I did want to just let the commission know that we've made tentative proposal to the governor, recognizing, as I'm sure all of you knew and had in your calendar, March is National Ethics Awareness Month. So we've made a proposal to the governor to try to do a proclamation recognizing National Ethics Awareness Month and using it as an opportunity to try to push the different departments and agencies to get through the ethics training and try to meet that requirement. So potentially doing a proclamation and doing some type of media outreach to encourage folks. Then using that as another inroad to some of the departments and agencies to schedule ethics trainings for them. So just making sure you're aware of that. If you have any suggestions or ideas, all ears, and trying to make that successful. So with regards to the training, as you may see, on January 24th, we had 227 participants in the Zoom training. Also, we had a general training for both the Senate and for the House, and have largely gotten all of the representatives through the training requirement. And we are now reaching out to the senators who have not made the requirement yet. They have until the end of the year to do so. We also had a lobbyist training. We did offer 2 of them, and cumulatively we've had a total of 69 lobbyists go through the ethics training. In the very beginning of the month, we also did do a general ethics training for the DOE for one of the complex areas, and we basically were able to do training for all principals and had a really informative and I think well-received training session there. You still do have the online training completions by department. This is showing the 2023 participation and the overall. We are still working on trying to get employee counts, and it's something that we hope to add as we get information back from agencies and departments. Shifting briefly to training statistics, you can see that we had in January a total of 1,051 participants on the self-directed training, and a total of 376 participating through the training webinars, and 113 participated in person trainings. So again, good statistics, but we got to keep up on them. Moving briefly to the guidance and assignment statistics, you can also see that in page 25 on attachment 3. Sorry, let's go there. No, that's correct. So you can see new assignments. We had 18 new complaints, 12 requests for invitations for gifts, invitations, and travel, and 4 guidance submissions, 1 record request, and 6 miscellaneous projects assigned. We closed out 8 complaints and completed 1 project. Finally, I guess I would like to notice as a miscellaneous, we have recently offered and received offered a position for the investigator position that's been open and received confirmation that the applicant is going to accept it. He's currently scheduled to start on March 6th, and we'll try to introduce you to him in March.
Good.
That's it.
Okay, any questions or comments? Let me start off with a question. The training that we're giving, I think, is excellent, but then at the end of the rainbow, how do we determine whether or not it's an effective tool to make sure that our state employees are complying with our ethics regulations? Is there some way we can compare like the number of complaints from last year to the end of this year after we go through all the training? I mean, how do we determine whether or not it's an effective program?
That's a wonderful question. That's one that I've wrestled with, and it's one I'd love to have any input from the commissioners. On a foremost level, obviously, we do the evaluation in part to see, how people are receiving the training. And as I've indicated, we're consistently on a scale of 1 to 5, getting on average, close to 5 or, 4.5. So, relatively well received from the participants. The next question might be is, well, how well does it retain with them 3 months, 6 months, 2 years later? And that is probably a good question that we're not prepared to answer. And we can definitely look at trying to do follow-up trainings, try to make sure they're getting the high road, or follow-up questions. The idea of trying to it sticks when you hear it more frequently, not just one time. And that's something we need to look at and explore. With regards to complaint tracking, if anything, we see an increase in complaints. And again, I think it's a positive thing because people go back to their agency or department and say, hey, we've always done it this way, but that seems to be a problem. And so they call us, and now we have an issue that we have to try to work through, resolve. And in general, I think that's positive. You now have a lot more people are aware of the ethics code and are a lot more likely to reach out and make a complaint. So I don't necessarily see the complaint levels necessarily going down as a result of training, but hopefully we're seeing a more ethically aware. And I still do believe the fundamental purpose of the training isn't necessarily to make people experts in the ethics code, but rather being sensitive to issues and being able to reach out when they see something and go, hey, wait, I think there might be an issue here. Let me call the ethics commission. And we develop that relationship. So I guess in sum, I do see the need for trying to reach out to people who've already done the training to sort of try to reaffirm or sort of, make sure it sticks in their head. And I think that would sort of be my primary focus, but I would be open to any other input folks have on how to make sure these trainings are as effective as possible.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is I'd like to see we have sort of a barometer in regards to, are we wasting our time giving these training sessions? I mean, is it not sticking into the minds of our state officials and our state employees? Should we improve our training? I mean, I don't think we should. I mean, it was so basic what was at least taught to me. Now I know after having so many years of government experience that some of the things that happened when I was in government was a no-no. But, so let me hear from the commissioners. Any questions or comments? Then I'm going to ask the staff, do you have any suggestions as to a barometer that, hey, our training is doing great, it's working? It's interesting that Rob said that the increase in complaints means that it's working as opposed to the other way around. Ray, Commissioner Grotke?
I think it's like the balloons that we keep finding over our airspace. Now that we're more attuned to them, we keep finding more. So I agree with Rob that sometimes the result of this heightened scrutiny or heightened awareness of the ethics code will mean more complaints. And I think that's good. I don't see it as a negative in terms of more complaints. Otherwise, we'd be out of a job, so to speak. So we want complaints to be made, and we want to be able to sort which ones are valid and which ones are not. But in terms of number, I think it's like those balloons. Now that we're sensitive to them, we find more.
Change her schedule.
That's good. As long as we don't have to shoot it down.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tobias, any comments? And then Commissioner Hall?
Well, I think that it's really great that the training is going so well and that it is really easy to access by everyone. What I would like to see is more of a partnership where people are not complaining about something, but verifying and checking to see, yes, is this an ethics violation or is this something that I need to be aware of? I know I've used Susan for that in the past with another group that I belong to, and it's been really helpful to have someone from the commission say, yeah, you're right, this is not something that we need to do. So in that sense, I would see having like a relationship, not with everybody, but with the majority that says, I'm aware of it, I know where to go to get an answer, and it's just verifying that I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Commissioner Hong?
I think ultimately our constituency is the public. And, you know, after the legislative actions occurred this year, hopefully, I think it would be a good idea to have some just general query of the public, you know, to see, do they feel that the standards, ethical standards of the state government have changed? I agree with Robert that the increasing complaints are a good sign. But really, the ultimate people we're serving should be queried on whether they feel that the environment is improving.
Thank you. Do you think we should reach out to the legislature in regard to seeing if what we're doing is, you know, acceptable? Is it great? Is it making a difference? Rob, maybe that's a suggestion, because, you know, we do serve at the pleasure of our, you know, our public, but also to our state officials. Any of the staff have any comments, Susan?
I wanted to kind of follow up on what Commissioner Tobias had mentioned, and this is just an incident that happened at one of the training sessions that I was helping Robert with last year, towards the end of the year. Someone attended that training session, and this person had not even been aware that he was subject to the conflicts of interest laws. And so, you know, we take chat questions during these sessions. And so this person just very casually asked about a situation that he was involved with, and he wanted to know whether that was a conflict of interest. And as it turned out, it did raise some conflicts, issues, and concerns. And so I spoke to him afterwards, and then it became clear that he may not have been the only person in that situation, that there were possibly other people also involved in the same situation. And so
Susan on the right.
So
Yes, go ahead.
So we're now in the process of working with that person's agency to discuss some of these issues that are coming up and things that can be done proactively to, first of all, let all of these people know that they're subject to the conflicts laws, and to see what kind of actions we can take and the agency can take to minimize those conflicts. None of this would have happened if that one person had not attended that training session last year. So I think the good thing about the training is that it sort of informs people that they are subject to these laws, and then can lead to actions by our office, not just to address things that have happened already, but to hopefully prevent ethics violations from occurring in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'd like to get some feedback. You know, after the session, after your session that I took, there was I think it was a survey. Was that a comment? Yeah, so maybe we can review some of the comments and share it with the commission. I mean, you know, if someone says, I didn't know that, oh, great, yeah, that's terrific. But I sure like to get some feedback, not only from the officials, but maybe for the legislature. What do they think? I mean, you know, they get a little more notoriety than just the regular state officials. And I won't mention names. So, Key, got anything?
Well, we do review the comments after every training, and you know, at Kogel, we concentrate on training sessions. I know a couple of us are probably going to a webinar on training, so we're always looking to improve our training. And yeah, so we'll see what steps get taken, you know, going forward to improve the training. But that's something we're always doing.
Thank you, Nancy. Then Bonita.
As far as measuring the effectiveness, I don't really have a great suggestion for that. I can tell you anecdotally after there are training sessions, when you're answering the phone calls that come in, there's a big uptick right after the training sessions. And that the people on the phone will often tell you, hey, I just went to the training and this has been going on in my agency and I want to check it with you because now I don't know if this is okay or not. So we do get quite a lot of those calls right after a training session. So it's at least an increased awareness.
Good. Bonita?
I think ditto to everyone's comments. I think generally these trainings, what they do is it raises greater awareness, which is the entire purpose of what the mandatory ethics training law was intended to do. And not only in terms of complaints and other information, but just general guidance, like that we're here to serve and serve as a resource. So, I think you see, as Nancy indicated, after trainings, we see generally an uptick in inquiries and calls. And so, providing that service, it just raises our profile in terms of we're here to provide that as a resource.
I think we
Mr.
do.
Chairman,
I think you folks do a wonderful job. I agree with you. Actually, the feedback that we get is very important to us. We serve at the pleasure of the state, really, and the public. And to me, in being military, I believe in training. I mean, I don't want to hear some person who's been brought to the carpet and says, I didn't know that was wrong. I mean, if you took the training, there shouldn't be any, hopefully they absorb your training, but there should be any excuse now that I didn't know. And that's really how important the training is. Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ray.
I'm just a little cautious. I would be a little cautious about saying that we work for the legislature or somehow the legislature has some influence on our decision making, because previous experience is that our relationship with the legislature always has to be antagonistic. Look on the gifts law and how much hell we went through because we wanted to change the law and make it stricter. So what I'm saying is that we're appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of the Chief Justice. There's nothing in there that says the legislature is involved.
I agree.
So we need to be careful about saying we want their input. We don't want their input.
We do not want their input. Well,
Nope, we will call it the way we see it.
okay.
That's my
Well,
opinion. I mean, I could be wrong, but seems to me
No.
there's a place for them and a place for us, and it's not cooperative.
I think that's well noted. We do have representatives from the legislature. Rob?
Just briefly, and again, I appreciate this discussion. I think it's a good one to have, and we should probably keep having some discussion on training because it is a vital role of what we do. Two things I've taken away from this conversation is potentially we should try to report out some of the attorney of the day statistics, maybe more upfront of what we're doing, because again, after having done trainings, now everyone who goes to that training who sees me now feels that they can reach out to me personally to ask questions. So I'd estimate, somewhere about a third of my day is spent responding to inquiries we get from, various folks who've gone through the training or, just know me. So they're going to reach out and say, what about this situation? And everyone who's employed here is probably in a similar situation or gets the attorney today and will get, 10 or 15 phone calls that they have to respond to. That is a vital part of what we do. Vital result of the training is establishing those relationships. They feel like they've come to us for guidance and advice, and it's something we should be reporting more, prominently, perhaps in a public fashion. In addition, I'd be happy to take some of the evaluation forms we receive, like a subset, and attach it to the next meeting, so at least you can get a view of sort of what the reaction is from these trainings. Like I said, I think it's generally positive. And if there's ever comments that we see there, we think we can act upon, we try to incorporate it to the training. But again, that should be public. It's nothing to hide. And we're happy to do it. And part of our budget included some additional money for training in particular. Part of the intent of what we thought to do was to do short training bits. So, for example, someone's trying to file a financial disclosure statement form. A 1 or 2 minute video showing them how to do it and making that available right there at the site. Those types of 1 or 2 minute digestible. If you have a question about X, here's a quick recap. Try to make something that's a little bit more, user friendly and just readily available. But, we can certainly look at maybe using some of that money for other types of enhancements of training, even maybe potentially doing some limited surveys to see how well are we doing and what can we do to improve. And I think something we'll just have to keep doing on a regular basis because, we've asked for a mandatory training law, and now that we've got it, we've got to make sure we do a good job at it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate Commissioner Gralty's comment to remind us who we really serve. So thank you, Commissioner Gralty. Let's move on, unless there's anything else that anyone want to discuss in regards to training. How about the public? Does the public have any comments? Guess not. Okay, let's move on. Under legislation, what I'm going to do is go through each, have Robert go through each one of the bills, and if you got any questions or comments, please bring it up. If not, we'll just keep on moving along in regards to each of the bills to make sure that everybody understands or have any concerns. Go ahead.
Thank you. If it's okay, Chair, maybe I'll just talk about categories rather than going through each and every bill.
Whatever you think is easiest.
There's a few that we have not dealt with before that I may ask the commission for direction on to make sure that we're representing your thoughts. So the first item is our budget request, which is HB 1514, which passed through the House Finance Committee and is moving to the Senate. There were some changes made, which included, for example, in giving a 4% increase of salaries, which is based on union negotiation, just putting us in place with everybody else. That was added to our budget request. But in general, essentially everything we've asked for is moving forward. Shifting gears to the County Ethics Commission, which is this proposal, as you may recall, is the idea of doing a one-time grant and aid to the various county ethics commissions as a mechanism or a carrot to encourage them to try to enhance what they're doing. Both HB 134 and SB 181 are moving forward. However, I have heard a fair amount of concern from legislators who just don't want to be in a position of starting to fund county programs that they think the county should do themselves. And they think it's a slippery slope. Once they do it for this, what stops, requests coming in for everything else? So my suspicion is this bill isn't going to move ultimately, but it currently is still alive and moving.
Before you continue.
Sure.
Oh, as we go through each category, because everybody has the agenda. If any of the commissioners have any questions or any comments, I'm going to stop after each category. Any commissioners have any questions or comments in regards to the budget area for HB 1514? Okay, not in regards to the County Ethics Commissions, HB 134 and SB 1190. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding SB 1565, this bill requires, introduced by someone else, requires that a person or organization that filed an ethics charge to the Ethics Commission be informed of the status of the charge upon request, including final disposition. This was a by request introduced by Kochi, if I remember correctly. Has not been scheduled for hearing. I'm not sure necessarily the person who drafted this is aware that an ethics charge is a more formal process that we've essentially rarely seen. It hasn't happened in a long time that I'm aware of. Regardless, I think in general, we do try to inform people if an investigation has been closed or not, but usually we don't provide any other details. So, it's something I think we try to do. And I think, moderately we would support this bill, unless the commission has any other thoughts. Recognizing that there's still a very limited amount of information we can provide the public, we can plainly tell them if an investigation has been closed or not.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, next.
So several financial disclosure bills. both HB 135 and SB 182, which are the Ethics Commission's package, are moving and have passed through the Judiciary Committees, as I recall. These amend the fines imposed for candidate disclosure statements and greatly simplify the enforcement process. As you may recall, we have a number of candidates who failed to file financial disclosure statements. This would try to make that process a great deal more simple and a little bit less complicated for everybody involved. It would also give the commission discretion in those situations as well.
Okay, any questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
Just one, it says amend the fines imposed. Did they have an idea of how much that would be, or is that at our discretion?
No, we had different schedules for financial disclosure statements depending on who you were. So employees and legislators, for example, it was $10 a day, which, could result in, a $1,000 plus fine. We've had situations where that's happened if someone simply doesn't file. It does away with that process. Instead, it makes a consistent fine schedule for everyone, which would start out with a $50 fine, which is the current fine for candidate disclosures. And if they don't act within 1 month, it jumps up to an additional $250 fine. And so, the idea is to try to find something that is going to motivate them, hopefully, to file after they've already missed the deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Before I be remiss, does the public have any questions? And I should have brought this up in regards to the budget, the county ethics commissions and the ethics commission's procedure and financial disclosures to this point. Any questions by the public or any comments? Okay, let's move on.
Moving to for financial disclosures, subsection 2, HB 136 is moving forward, and the Senate President has stated that they are going to post the legislative allowance expenditures on their website. So they think that they're already doing it, they don't need to pass a bill. I have been told indirectly that that will be posted in March, and it sounds like they may be doing it quarterly, but I can't say that for certain. The one changed HB 136 was to make it annual, so there'd be an annual report that the House wants to post.
Questions, comments from the commissioners? Any from the public? Okay, next.
In addition, HB 141 is moving forward. It requires each state legislator to include disclosures of financial interests specifically connected to lobbyists or lobbying organizations. I should note that the House has heard many of our bills. The fact that the Senate hasn't heard as many may not be too indicative. Most of the ones on the Senate side that we have are only referred to the judiciary. So as a result, there's still plenty of time for those to be heard. Many of the House bills that were only referred to the judiciary have passed through and are now in the Senate. So, tentatively looking promising on a number of bills moving forward.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners or any comments? Any from the public? Okay, next.
So HB 142, which prohibits lobbyists from making gifts that are otherwise prohibited under state ethics law. So essentially the intent here is to make the gifts law reciprocal between both lobbyists and employees and legislators, is moving forward. And SB 664, to my knowledge, has not moved forward or been scheduled yet.
Okay, any questions or comments by any of the commissioners? How about from the public? Okay, next.
So SB 149, which establishes a continuous legislative session, we submitted testimony saying the commission has not yet taken a position on this, but we'd be interested in being part of the discussion should the bill keep moving forward. I did want to pause just to the extent that this bill keeps moving forward or something similar is happen to get input from the commission. part of, I think, the motivation of liking the idea of a full-time legislator is it allows us potentially to have greater restrictions on secondary employment, that potentially reduce the number of conflict of interest situations, does have other sort of, I'd call it tertiary benefits, which, while not exactly our kuleana, I think sort of fit in with sort of our overall theme of allowing for greater hearing notice, greater time, greater opportunities for sunshine law and other kinds of related things if you move to a longer session. So let me pause there. I don't know if the commissioners have any feelings on this, and if so, if we get direction, what we should do in this type of bill.
Yeah, if any commissioners have any questions or comments, let me direct one of my questions to one of our commissioners who sat in that situation as a state legislator. Commissioner Gralty, what do you think about that? Going full-time, whole year rather than just 3 or 4 months during the year?
I guess it
If you have
flies in the
comments.
face of the original prescription of the framers of our Constitution that wanted to see people from the community become legislators for a brief period of time. It's always been envisaged as a part-time occupation, and it's now going to be professional legislators. And I don't think that the public is ready for it, but I don't know. To me, it's a bad idea, but I think the final say is the public's, and I think it's going to be a hard sell.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Tobias or Commissioner Hong, any comments on that?
Can I add
Yeah.
one more thing,
Yes,
Mr.
go
Chair?
ahead.
One of the frustrations of serving in the legislature is that although it's called a part-time body, it's really a full-time job. People call you when the electrical lights or electrical circuits are down and they can't watch football. They call their legislator, even if it's out of session. They ask you to attend all these council meetings and group meetings, even if it's past the 60 days. So the public is getting a free benefit for those who are able to do it. On the other hand, you have legislators who can't do it, so they're not as well informed and they're not as involved when the session starts. So there's also a downside to it. My view is that it was intended to be a part-time legislature. It's like California became a full-time legislature, and look what they got. They didn't get any better. In fact, they're in everybody's pocket now. So maybe we should keep the legislature as a part-time body, so that there's time for the public to react and things to happen that are not self-serving or skewed a certain way.
Well, thank you very much for those comments, since you've been in that particular position. I think Commissioner Tobias or Commissioner Hong, any comments? You have to unmute yourself. Commissioner Tobias, unmute.
Yeah,
There you go.
I was thinking that I'm not sure how this pans out, but you have people that are running for the legislature over and over and over again. And this, to me, is making it a career, as opposed to what Commissioner Gralty is saying about a part-time, letting the community, if you will, have access to the legislature and its workings. So I'm not sure how this is going to change anything if they do decide, yeah, they need to go full-time.
Commissioner Hong, any comments?
I think a continuous legislative session would be reasonable, but there should be linked to term limits.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, thank you very much, commissioners.
If I can add in. briefly.
Sure, go ahead.
I do agree with Commissioner Gralty's comment that most legislators are in fact acting full-time. I mean, the reality of getting elected and staying elected requires you essentially to be full-time at that position. And it's relatively rare that somebody can have a legitimate other part-time job And so there are situations where essentially people are hired by certain companies or entities that, you know, arguably look like essentially they're being the lobbyist or the organization, you know, the head of that organization and the legislature. It does create, you know, I think relatively significant conflict of interest issues that I think the reality of the part-time legislator, and I also agree with Commissioner Gralty that the reality is the public probably likes the things the way they are and would not vote to change it. However, I do think it's probably worthwhile for us to continue to point out that if someone has another part-time job, it should not be something that is directly linked to lobbying the legislature, or directly linked to trying to push special interests at the legislature. It's difficult to word that. And it's difficult to say that, you know, trying to go parse job by job by job, also recognizing that, you know, much of the conflicts of interest law does not apply to legislators currently. So, you know, there are issues there that I do think we probably, regardless of we think about a full-time legislature or not, you know, want to keep probing, I think, potentially to try to find solutions. You know, the easiest one in my mind is to make it full-time and just say, you know, you've got to be there full-time and you really shouldn't be having those other types of secondary jobs. But if we're not going to go down that road, you know, there's probably other ways to try to get at it.
You're not asking us to make a decision in regards to support or not support this, are you?
I think ultimately, yes, I am asking for an official position because that gives us direction on the testimony, what to say. You know, I think just sort of reading the tea leaves, a motion might be is to not support a continuous full-time session, but potentially trying to explore ways to address conflicts of interest with secondary positions, secondary jobs.
Commissioners, did you hear that? What's your pleasure? I'll entertain the motion that we support or not support or take no position. I think that's really the three options.
I move that we take no position.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded, we take no position, moved by Commissioner Gralty and seconded by Commissioner Tobias. Discussion. Commissioner Gralty, why no position?
I think it's a thicket. And I don't think the Ethics Commission wants to be in a position of being on one side or the other of a very contentious issue. I think we will enforce the law, although the law will have to be changed if we're going to go this way. But I don't think we should take a position that we are advocating for it, because I think it puts us in the thicket of things. And I don't think we should be in the thicket of things, or the thick of things.
Thank you. Commissioner Tobias and then Commissioner Hong, any comments?
No, I think Ray has summed it up quite well.
Commissioner Hong?
You know, I would agree with, you know, what Robert has kind of put forward, that it really what we're interested is a linkage between any potential employment and conflict of interest. So I would support Ray.
Any questions or comments from the public in regards to this motion? If not, I'll call for the question. Roll call.
Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Chair.
Aye. No objections. The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving along.
Thank you, commissioners. Switching to the lobbyist law, HB 137 is moving forward, which requires a statement of expenditures, specifically identifying the identity, bill number, resolution number, etc. There was some pushback from Bob Toyafuku, who I think is concerned less about the intent, but just the practicality of it. Made comments about, you know, sort of at what point do they slip over into the aspect of lobbying? How do they report it? What if the bill number changes? So sort of practical questions, not necessarily sharp opposition. And, you know, we've committed to continue working with them and trying to make the online process as simple as possible. Again, the bill is moving forward, but, you know, I think it will be something we'll have to keep an eye on with regards to how do we make this something that lobbyists feel they can comply with?
Questions, comments from the commissioners? Any from the public? Okay, next.
Maybe an additional just component to this. I think there was concern with what point does talking to a legislator on a bill trigger to the point where they're quote unquote lobbying? Asking, hey, what's happening with this bill? Is that enough, for example? And I think the reality or the answer is, it is the behind the scenes conversations that, I think the lobbying law is trying to provide transparency to. And so I think the intent is to err on the discretion of saying that should probably be reported because, it is those things that people don't see. When someone submits testimony, for example, that's pretty obvious and transparent. It is the behind the scenes stuff that, is the intent of the lobbying law. So again, it's a conversation, but just sort of letting people know where it is.
Okay, thank you.
HB 138 is moving forward, which is the mandatory lobby law, lobby training, which seems like so far there's really no opposition to or concerns with.
Questions, comments from the commissioners? Any from the public? Okay, next.
So SB 805, I did want some direction from the commission. There are also a couple of other bills that are similar in nature. And so I'll quickly try to summarize what these bills do, and I'll try to make a recommendation for the commission. Lobbying currently really does only involve two things. Someone being paid to represent an entity before, on anything that's legislative. It also applies to attempts to influence rulemaking. So it does not apply to much of what the executive branch does. There was an article which I think is promoting some of these legislative efforts in the civil beat, referencing an entity that hired a retired NBA player to fly into Hawaii to extensively lobby for, I use the word lobby in its informal manner, to lobby on behalf of a company or entity that had a project before the Public Utilities Commission, including meetings with many legislators, including meetings with directors, including meetings with the governor, et cetera, and commissioners. Under the current definition, this would not be lobbying. I think there's sort of maybe a thought process of maybe some level of lobbying the administration or the executive branch should trigger lobbying requirements and some level of transparency. The concern that we have with many of the bills is the reach of what they would do. We don't necessarily want to have somebody who's applying for a permit. For example, we don't have fishing licenses necessarily, but someone applying for a fishing license or sort of a small permit, maybe trying to reserve Iolani Palace grounds or something along those lines, necessarily be swept up in a lobbying provision. And so I think this is something that we would generally say that there is a need to look at this. And again, this is my recommendation, need to look at this, but it's probably going to require a 50-state survey, try to find the best practice and really try to be thoughtful about it to make sure that we don't get into a lot of unintended consequences by being too broad with who is a lobbyist and not a lobbyist. So I think the idea would be is asking the legislature to defer the bill this year, give us some time to work on it, and potentially come back next year with something that's as targeted as we can make it.
So your recommendation is just to have a motion that we should do, that the legislature defer SB 805
And similar bills.
and similar bills. Comments or actions by the commissioners or any questions?
Move approval.
Second,
Moved and seconded that we take a stand that we defer Senate Bill 805 and related legislation. Moved by Commissioner Hong, seconded by Commissioner Gralty.
yes,
Discussion? Ready for the question? Roll call?
Commissioner Gralty,
aye,
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
Aye.
Chair.
Aye. No objections, motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
Nepotism. HB 139 was heard by the Judiciary Committee in the House. And there were concerns about its applicability to the legislature. There was comments made that because new rules are being proposed by the House, that potentially they would look at doing an HD1 with the idea that there'd be a law applicable to all state employees, and that the House would have its own internal rules on nepotism. There was a article published today, and there were a draft of ethics or draft of the rule changes being proposed by House and is open for comments by House members, which does not include anything on nepotism currently. So this issue is sort of in limbo right now. The Ethics Commission is still pushing pretty hard on HB 138, and I think the intent would be is to support whatever we can get, even if it is only to employees, because I think with 60,000 employees, a lot of situations that we arise, at least having a bright line rule applicable to them would be tremendously beneficial. However, there's still probably a need and an urgency about the legislature also addressing the issue. I will point out that the Senate does have a rule preventing nepotism, and apparently they have not had a situation for quite some time where they have done any type of exemption to that rule.
it's interesting because actually during the training program, I did submit a question. Does that include, or what does that include in regards to relative? Because I think I was explained to me by Key that it was spouse, or it was very limited or narrow, I should say, in scope. So what do we mean by a relative? Does that mean my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, my cousin, my auntie, my uncle, my stepson, can somebody answer that? I mean, or is this going to define what relative means?
The training session said that it applied to minor living in your house or your spouse.
May I, Robert?
Yes, please, Keith, you're the expert.
Sure. So basically, currently, the conflicts of interest law only applies to spouse and dependent children. So, that's where we are conflicts of interest wise. Commissioner Hong also referenced, sales to subordinates, that sort of thing. That would be, prohibited as well. But in terms of nepotism, there's nothing with a broad reach, bright line rule. So the only rule right now is you cannot give unwarranted benefits to anyone, but it's difficult for us to prove what's unwarranted. So the nepotism law that's been proposed does include the categories that you're saying. So it's any household members, relatives, brothers, sister, in-laws, and then DHS had made a recommendation for foster children and Hawaiʻi relationships to include that. So, we supported that as well. The bright line rule would basically be you cannot interview these people for employment, you cannot promote them. You can't really take any employment action affecting someone you're directly related to as defined in the bill.
Thank you. So actually, this bill makes the definition of relative broader. Is that a good way to look at it?
Relatives not currently defined in the code, but it adds a definition of relative, and then it says that you're not allowed to take employment action like promoting those individuals. Yeah.
So does that mean that if I'm a legislator, I can't hire my wife as an office worker or office staff?
If it applied to legislators, that is what it would mean.
Well, there's a way to get around that, is that you hire my wife and I will hire your wife, I had my mother-in-law working for me, but that was then, and mother-in-law was not a blood relative, so it was not a problem. But if you have a wife, I think clearly that's a problem. Cannot work for you, but maybe she can work for somebody else. We had that with Senator, what's the name of the guy? The reporter. He had his wife working for Senator Ihara. No, the one from Manoa. Anyway, my mind is not very sharp anymore. But anyway, that's how they do it. You hire my wife, I'll hire your wife.
So how can we have
You
a
can't stop that.
mechanism? How can we have a mechanism to prohibit that? I'll ask Key. I mean, you know, it seems like regardless of what we do, they're quote
There's a
unquote
way around it.
loopholes.
I'm gonna leave that strategy up to Robert, but I do think the nepotism law goes, you know, it takes a step in, you know, prohibiting these practices that are somewhat common that we see in complaints.
Well, my only comment that to Commissioner Gralty's, I guess, expose is shame on them, but we can't do anything. I don't know.
So I think the first effort would be is obviously try to get the nepotism law passed. I had one senator reference the fact that, you know, his son was far better qualified than many of the candidates he got in, and that his son would be, you know, significantly better than, you know, the folks that he's had to hire over the years. But he understood the importance of a bright line rule, understand the public appearance of using state money to hire your relative. So, you know, obviously our first goal will be to try to get that passed. And, you know, I'm happy to take half a Manapua if that's what it's going to take, but we're going to continue to push for what we can get.
Okay, so I guess we'll just leave it to getting this passed and then the interpretation be left to us, I guess. Is that it?
Well, the definition of relative is clearly spelled out in this bill. And so I
Okay.
think it would be, you know, relatively straightforward of who falls within the definition of relative if this bill passes. In addition, we have proposed an expansion to address Hanai. And we've taken the language from DHERD, what DHERD's recommended, and we're happy that DHERD's supporting this bill. So, you know, the administration's on board and supports it. So great.
Do you want us to take an action or we just leave it as is?
No action necessary, just
All right.
giving you information about sort of where this is at.
So you're still faced with a scenario that Commissioner Gralty had mentioned, but we'll leave that one to you folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a public point of view, if there's somebody else hiring, somebody else supervising, you know, it's probably not nepotism. It may be something that would trigger unwarranted privilege or a fair treatment issue, which we still have jurisdiction over. But again, I think the idea of trying to create a bright line around nepotism is to make it really obvious and clear and transparent from anybody in that situation. And it would certainly make it a lot easier for us to both provide guidance and to enforce. Because
Okay.
right now, it is a very difficult situation for us to do
Yeah,
something
well,
about.
that's why. Any other questions or comments by the commissioners? Yeah, how about the public? Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you for that. Next.
So the next bill I'm going to ask, and hopefully it could be a hopefully easy situation. It's a proposal introduced by Senator Ihara to increase the post-employment restriction for former legislators from 12 months to 24 months. And so it is something, and in full candor, I have a draft of testimony in support of this already written. So if the commission is, regardless where the commission goes, you know, we'll tailor testimony accordingly. I think the argument is simply because legislators are so much in the public eye, there is a rational reason to make this longer, and it would match the term of the House. So you'd have some turnover. It would no longer, you know, hopefully be as direct influence peddling, which I think the intent of this is to address. So my recommendation would be to support this bill. Quite frankly, I'm not sure it passed, but, you know, again, it does feel like something we can and should support.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? Commissioner, let's start with Commissioner Gralty, and then I'll ask the other two commissioners, any comments to support or not support?
I think it makes sense for the prohibition to apply for the entire term that a House member serves. There's some logic to that. And I think we should be on the side of extending the period, but not to be so unreasonable. I mean, we want people to get employed eventually, otherwise they'll be on welfare. So I would support the 24 months. I think it's reasonable.
Commissioner Hong and then Commissioner Tobias.
I would support it at 24 months. To be consistent.
Commissioner Tobias.
I would support it as well.
Okay, any questions or comments from the public? Then I'll entertain a motion that we support Senate Bill 1187.
So move.
I'm
Second,
sorry, who moved?
Gralty.
Oh, moved by Commissioner Gralty and seconded by Commissioner Tobias. Any discussion? Not, roll call.
Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
aye.
Chair.
Aye. No objections, motion's carried. Next,
HB 725, the Public Bill of Rights, was deferred. The Attorney General's office submitted fairly strong testimony raising concerns about the constitutionality of a entity being able to investigate the legislature through subpoenas, raising concerns about the ability for this entity to discipline. I think in oral testimony that sort of got pulled back, recognizing that the Public Bill of Rights did not provide any discipline area. It was really only an investigatory agency that's being proposed. Based on the AG's testimony, this bill was deferred because I think there was a perception that they want to try to police themselves in this regard. And there was maybe some alliteration that it may show up in the new House rules. In the new House rules that have been circulated to date, there is nothing addressing this. And so you may have seen there's an article today in the Civil Beat where Judge Foley was pushing for both the nepotism and the Public Bill of Rights to be incorporated into the rules, if that's indeed the direction the legislature wants to go. But as of now, this bill is deferred indefinitely.
okay. Then let's move on to the next.
HB 140, which is record disposition. This is something we introduced or asked to be introduced, is moving forward. And that essentially is it. There are some short form bills, which nothing substantive has happened. Maybe one additional add-on, there is a number of bills regarding to task force, which if it's a task force, our rules already essentially say much of the ethics code doesn't apply to sort of these advisory entities. The main requirement is that they have a conflict of interest, that they disclose it, at the earliest convenient moment. So essentially at the first meeting, first hearing, that they disclose it publicly. There's sort of a standard language that some drafter is including in many bills now. It says that these task forces are exempt from Chapter 84. We have consistently been sort of sending in just testimony saying it's probably not necessary. And indeed, if the entity has any actual authority, it's probably unconstitutional to do that. Just do not put those down here. Probably at the next meeting, we may try to make a better effort of trying to show some of those bills. You're just aware of them.
Questions, comments by the commissioners? Anybody in the public? Okay. Next.
That's it. Chair, I turn it back over to you for item number 5.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I think all of these bills are very important. And thank you for all the discussion and the action taken. So, item number 5 is in regards to the increased administrative fines. Actually, I was the one that asked Robert to put it on the agenda. My comment after working for 4 years, 4 and plus years on this commission is, I don't know how much teeth we have in regards to enforcing the ethics law. Somebody may be, brought up on charges for a bribery for $50,000, and the max, I believe, is only $1,000. We can slap them on the hand. Is that correct?
We could also ask for restitution. So if they got the 50,000, potentially it could also be it.
Well, I'm sure by this time they probably spent it all. I won't mention names. I just bring it up as an item. I don't know what the commissioners think. I'm thinking of maybe if we have some kind of mechanism to increase the fines. I was on the Honolulu Liquor Commission. We sure really hit hard on these establishments, or we call licensees, who violate the liquor law. And I tell you, it really made a difference. It was high fine or suspension or revoke. I know it's not the same, but what do you folks think in regards to just $1,000 slap on the hand and, you know, or should we increase or just leave it as it is? I just bring it up. Open for discussion, any of the commissioners? I'll go backwards. Okay, I'm not backwards, but I'll start from the right to the left, but that's what I see. Any comments on that, Commissioner Tobias?
I think $1,000 is a really small amount for many entities to pay, and it's really just a slap on the wrist. I agree with you.
Commissioner Hong? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any figure in mind?
Not really.
Because that's something that we can leave to the, I'm thinking, to the staff and come up with a recommendation. You know,
Well,
$100,000, I don't know. I'm just joking. Commissioner Hong?
I think having the staff investigate this would be the best option. Really, as we face issues of collections, $1,000 is probably not worthwhile trying to collect.
Commissioner Gralty?
I would add another 0. However, I would also like to know what other states are doing in this regard.
Mhm.
I don't want to be so far out of whack that we become unusual.
Good
So I
point.
would like to know what California does in other states. But
Good point. Good point.
an extra
I'm
0
gonna- Thank you.
seems like reasonable.
Should I ask the staff what they think, or just leave it to the commissioners?
I don't think there is a vehicle necessary in the legislature this year to do anything of this nature. And so it would be a great idea for us to take the summer essentially to look at what other states have done and come up with a proposed bill to introduce next legislative session. I mean, ideally, it would have been introduced this session, particularly in the particular climate. The chance of it passing is greatest right now. However, again, we just don't have a vehicle, so we'd be happy to try to put forward a proposal for you to consider next legislative session for us to introduce.
Well, I'm not going to ask for any action by the commissioners since we can't do anything until the next legislative session. So unless there are any objections, I want to ask the staff to look into this and take the recommendation of the representative Commissioner Gralty in regards to what
Senator,
other
you mean
states
senator.
are doing. Add another 0. Of
Take a
course,
look.
yeah, I'm sorry that Commissioner Gralty won't be around to see what happens unless he wants to, oh, his term is up.
I'll be reading the high road.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was about to say you can reapply, but the term is
No.
up.
I'm term limited.
Yeah, term limit. Is it okay? Any objections to doing that? We'll leave it up to the staff to research and come back with a recommendation for the legislative section next year. Any objections to that?
No.
Seeing there's none, let's do that. Okay.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6, the never-ending.
Why did we
Akana
even put
case.
it on the thing?
It might surprise us with a decision.
I'm the reason I'm chuckling is because I remember getting on the commission. Is it 4 years? I don't know when it was. 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah,
And
you were the
that
newbie
was
then.
that was one of the first out of, I think there were only 3 cases that this commission's ever tried, and this is one of them. And it got on there, and there it was. And I remember it was Commissioner Gralty, right?
Yeah, we were on TV every night.
Every night. Yeah, I had to change my coat. No, anyway. But anyway, I'm sorry, Commissioner Gralty. We'll let you know what happens at.
I'll read about it
Hopefully
in the
not.
high road.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think you're implying that you know what I'm going to say. There are no updates in this case. The wheels of justice move slowly.
Exceedingly slow.
That's it.
That's it.
Any questions or comments by the commissioner after that comment? Any by the public? All I can say is I hope it's settled before I retire.
Well, I hope Rowena Nakana is still alive when it's decided. Never mind me.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Oh, item number 7, the evaluation of the executive director. Unless there are any objections, I'm gonna postpone because we're still waiting for all of the evaluations by the commissioners to come in. So we'll put on the agenda for the next session unless there are any objections by the commissioners.
No objection.
Public?
And I do want to say that I sent out the evaluation form and missed one of the commissioners, which is the reason why it's happening. So I take responsibility for this and apologize.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions by the public on this matter? Okay, if not, I believe that takes care of our agenda. Unless there's anything else, Commissioner Grauta, anything else?
Nope.
Commissioner Hong? Commissioner Tobias?
No,
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn and then resume the executive session in 5 minutes. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
Moved
second,
by Commissioner Hong, seconded by Commissioner Tobias. I need a roll call on this too.
We do.
Okay, roll call.
Commissioner Gralty,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
Commissioner Tobias,
aye.
Chair.
I vote aye and no objections. The session is now adjourned and we'll take a 5-minute break at 10. Right now it's 10